What if, overnight, every country on Earth had the same population? Let's say exactly 100 million people, no more, no less. Imagine waking up to that world. Suddenly, giants like China and India would shrink from over 1.4 billion people down to just 100 million. At the same time, a tiny nation like Iceland, with its current population of less than 500,000, would explode to that same 100 million mark. This isn't just a numbers game. It's a thought experiment that would flip everything we know about power, wealth, and geography completely on its head. Let's start with global power. For centuries, a massive population has been a cornerstone of influence. More people meant a bigger army, a larger workforce, and a stronger voice on the world stage. But in our new world, that advantage is gone. China and India, the two most populous countries, would instantly lose their demographic dominance. Their immense human capital, which fueled their economic and military rise, would be cut down by over 90%. On the other hand, smaller, highly efficient nations like Norway or Singapore would suddenly find themselves on equal footing in terms of manpower. Imagine Singapore, with its world-class infrastructure and governance, now commanding a population of 100 million. The United States, Russia, and Brazil would also see their relative power shift dramatically. They'd no longer be competing with just a handful of other giants, but with dozens of newly empowered nations from every corner of the globe. Why does this happen? Because modern power is deeply tied to population. A large population provides the recruits for a formidable military, the workers for massive industrial output, and the sheer scale needed for political leverage. When you equalize that number, you're not just changing a statistic, you're fundamentally redistributing the raw potential for global influence. The old world order would crumble, and a new, unpredictable one would rise from its ashes. Now let's talk about the economy, because it would be thrown into absolute chaos. For decades, global trade has been built on a simple premise. Some countries have a massive, low-cost labor force, while others have capital and technology. In our 100 million-person world, that entire model shatters. Manufacturing powerhouses like China, India, and Bangladesh, whose economies rely on their enormous workforces, would lose their primary competitive edge overnight. The Made in China tag might become a relic of the past. Think about small, incredibly wealthy nations like Qatar or Luxembourg. They're rich, but their resources and infrastructure are designed for a tiny population. Suddenly, they'd have to provide jobs, housing, food, and water for 100 million people. The strain would be unimaginable. Their economies, built on finance or energy exports for a small citizenry, would likely collapse under the weight of this new, massive populace. It would be an economic doomsday scenario. This would trigger a monumental resource management crisis. Nations with limited arable land, scarce fresh water, or few natural resources would face an impossible task. How does a desert nation feed 100 million? How does a city-state house them? In this new world, technology would become the ultimate survival tool. Countries with advanced automation, AI, and robust infrastructure would be the ones to adapt fastest. The ability to produce food in vertical farms or manage resources with smart grids would no longer be a luxury. It would be the difference between stability and total collapse. But beyond the geopolitics and economics, what about the human impact? The consequences here would be staggering. The world's megacities would be completely transformed. Places like Tokyo, New York, and Delhi, which are home to tens of millions, would see their populations shrink drastically, leaving behind ghost-like districts and empty skyscrapers. Meanwhile, tiny capitals that most people couldn't find on a map, like Reykjavik in Iceland, Vaduz in Liechtenstein, or San Marino, would explode. They'd become sprawling, overcrowded metropolises overnight, their historic centers swallowed by hastily built high-rises. This would trigger the largest migration and displacement crisis in human history. Where do the 1.3 billion people from China and India go? And where do the 99 million new residents of Iceland or Monaco come from? The logistical and humanitarian nightmare would be beyond comprehension. Governments would be completely overwhelmed, struggling to provide basic services and maintain order in countries that are either suddenly empty or bursting at the seams. Cultures would collide, blend, and evolve in fascinating and unpredictable ways. Imagine the unique traditions of a small Pacific island nation suddenly being shared among 100 million people from all over the world. Would these diverse cultures find a way to coexist, creating vibrant new societies? Or would the clash of values and traditions lead to conflict? It raises a profound question. Would individual happiness rise or fall in this new world? Would countries even be able to hold on to their identities, or would they merge into new regional blocks, defined not by history, but by the shared challenge of survival? So, in this radically new world, who actually wins? Who thrives when every nation has 100 million people? The old superpowers would be struggling, and the tiny nations would be overwhelmed. The new leaders would likely be the middle-tier nations, the ones with the perfect combination of resources, stability, and, most importantly, space. Think about countries like Canada, Australia, Argentina, and Kazakhstan. These nations are massive in terms of land area, but have relatively small populations today. In our new scenario, they'd have ample room to grow, vast natural resources to support their new 100 million strong population, and often stable governments to manage the transition. They would become the new global titans, blessed with everything needed to succeed. Africa, as a continent, could also experience an incredible renaissance. With its population numbers equalized with the rest of the world, its immense, largely untapped natural resources would suddenly become a colossal advantage. Nations with smart governance and a focus on renewable energy would surge ahead. In this world, it's not about demographic muscle anymore. It's a brains over brawn game. Innovation, effective policy, and sustainable technology would matter far more than sheer numbers. The countries that invested in education and forward-thinking leadership would be the ones to rule this new era. This all leads to the final critical question. Would this world actually be fairer, or would it be even worse? On one hand, equalizing population might seem like a step toward global equality. The United Nations General Assembly would suddenly represent a world of equals, where no single country can dominate through population alone. Power might become more balanced, forcing nations to cooperate and rely on diplomacy rather than brute force. But on the other hand, equality in numbers doesn't mean fairness in reality. Geography, climate, and resources are not distributed equally. A country in a fertile region would still have a massive advantage over one in a desert. This could spark entirely new conflicts, not over ideology or borders, but over the fundamental resources needed to survive, like water and food. The massive, chaotic migrations could ignite tensions and redefine what it means to be a refugee. Ultimately, this thought experiment teaches us a valuable lesson. Maybe it's not the size of a nation's population that truly defines its success. Maybe it's about how that nation uses what it has, its resources, its ingenuity, and its values. It's a powerful reminder that true strength comes not from numbers, but from wisdom and resilience. But I want to know what you think. If every country had the same population, which one do you believe would rise to the top and rule the world? Let me know your pick in the comments below. Thanks for watching,